So I want to talk a little bit about how thinking happens at the startup stage and now on strategy, how you develop the initial sense for what you wanted to accomplish and how you have either adapted or not. When you look at startup ideas, how do you evaluate their strategy? What do you look for in the articulation of it?
So one of the things that has not changed is that from the beginning with this concept, I was committed to doing it with serious and violent felony cases. So cases where people would otherwise do at least a year of jail or prison time, ones that were not currently being diverted to any of the other alternatives to incarceration that existed. So things that are really out of reach of anything but kind of Attica and Sing Sing. And there was a lot of pressure not to do that from every angle because there are a vast array of people who might agree to the project at a lower level. It's a lot less stressful if it's juveniles, it's a lot less stressful if it's low-level offenses, and the research that's out there all supports those sorts of things too. So there was a lot of push from a number of directions to confine it in that way. And one of the decisions in reaching out to the prosecutor, who is my most important partner in the work, that without his agreement it's never going to happen, was to present that as definitional of the project, right? So this is a project for felonies that would do a year, not we want to do this restorative justice project and can we have these kinds of cases? And that was risky because he could have been like, absolutely not. Are you kidding me? This is second time armed robbery and it's going to go to you and he's going to say I'm sorry and shake hands and walk. Are you out of your mind, right? And so that was a decision that involved a certain amount of risk, but it's calculated in the sense that I know some things about the prosecutor's record in Brooklyn and know his openness to diversion. I did a lot of homework about his history as well as a lot of homework looking at the trends in restorative justice. And one of the things, kind of looking at a ton of meta-analyses and a ton of research out there, was being able to extract a trend that evidenced the fact that these programs do better with the more serious cases. And then being able to make kind of the logical argument as to why that would be, which is mostly this brings you face to face with what you did. If what you did is more serious, the consequence, the way you're moved will be more significant. So it was about leveraging that research too that was really important in shaping the decision to do that. One of the most important shifts has been this real serious inclusion of a broader range of victims of crime. Right, so what it means if we're prioritizing reaching out to and engaging young men of color who are harmed by crime. Because that means, first of all, we can't just make referrals to all the existing victim service agencies that give you, advocacy in court and police escort, police protection. Most 19-year-old young black men feel like they have police escorts everywhere they go already, right? And so they're not looking for it. And they're not going to the DA's office to get that. Many of them have open cases. So the structure of that is entirely inaccessible to them. So it meant that the amount of work that we needed to be willing to take on and the types of things we might have to build in-house expanded somewhat. The pressure from the other side is to make sure that we're not trying to be everything to everyone. So there's a sense the needs are so profound and so vast, and to really transform violence, you need to get people jobs, you need to get them off drugs, you need to solve their family problems, and you need to get them into college, and we're not going to do all of that at all. And so one of the things that's been challenging is figuring out how to clarify how we articulate the mission of the organization, how we articulate our theory about why this intervention that we're planning works in such a way that not only explains to funders and potential supporters why this isolated intervention that doesn't give GED classes and all of those things might accomplish something, but also in a way that lets the staff work and feel satisfied. Because a lot of this is also about recognizing kind of you're building a project and you're building an organization at the same time. And figuring out how those work together. So the project has to, what do I want to see these young people do and what access do I want them to have? And the question, what's the organizational structure? So that's questions like, will people's caseloads include harmed and responsible parties, or will I split them?
So when you think about how you've had to shift the thinking or shift how you've talked about it, what has influenced, what's triggered for you, I need to change? What information are you taking in that's making you react or adapt?
So some of it was in talking about the idea with people in city council, with the crime victims community, just talking around the city, some of it was the looks that I got, which are like, are you out of your mind? Right? Or people saying, so you're, like, I would explain it to a councilman, and they'd say, so you're telling me I'm walking down the stairs on the train, and this big hulking man, black man with a scar on his face, shoves me down, and I fall, and he grabs my wallet, and he kicks me in the rib, and to a point that you're like, I need you to stay with me in this, right? You know, like, really the emotional reaction. And some of that's been a really important lesson, is recognizing when you talk about crime that if people have a personal reference point, they go there immediately. And so how to keep that conversation engaged, where they're clear about what we're talking about, and where they're able to stay present to kind of the strategic or intellectual or whatever other conversation.
I think from the beginning, why I ended up in my kitchen without any kind of supporters at the beginning is I had a very difficult time articulating what I was trying. I knew what I was trying to do, and it seemed like such a good idea to me. I just couldn't understand why it wasn't obvious. Why did I have to explain to people why it was a good idea? And that obviously doesn't work like that. So I had to figure it out. Also, I like to plan things, but also if I think, I'm not naturally going to lay out every step and see what the end is. I just feel like, I just sort of charge forward, which in the end served me well in this. If I wasn't going to be able to convince, at least I could just keep doing it anyway. But I guess ultimately I sat down with people and came up with a 5-year strategic plan, a business plan as we called it. And I think I was in that when we were connecting. And I got a lot of input from a lot of people who did have those skills of thinking through things and figuring out how you were going to measure things. What's hard in our case, the measuring impact is of course very difficult because it's all on the internet and it's anonymous, which is why it's so good for so many people, but it also creates a challenge of, well, I don't know what anyone does. I can count how many people come to the website, I can look at what pages they're looking at, but I really have a hard time knowing what they're going to do with it. And even if I do know what they do with it, what counts as a positive impact? And I am always thinking about the person who's just reading it, and maybe she doesn't leave, maybe she doesn't take any, she doesn't get a restraining order, she doesn't get a divorce, but she is empowered in some way by reading that, and so she's a little more safe, or her life is a little bit better. And so I that's very important to me, as is the person who's able to get out and get safety with her children, and go to college and get a job and become rich. Like, that would be great too. Not, she may have already been rich, but get rich on her own. So figuring that out, and I continue to struggle with that issue, and always will. But since people are more familiar with the internet now than they were 8 years ago, and funders are, the boards of foundations are younger, so they're understanding where it's a little easier for me to keep. That helps me a lot.
And do you find that you stuck to the plan as it was, or how often did you change and adapt? And
I did. Another problem I had at the beginning is I didn't, and what people told me was, it's too, this is big. This is going to take you a really long time. No problem. I think I can really get it done in a couple of months. It's going to be great. And of course, it was a very big project. It took me a very long time to do. And so I think that was a communication issue at the beginning. The strategic plan helped me see that. Like, okay, how long is it taking me to write content for Connecticut? Okay, now I got to do that 50 more times. How long is that going to take? And so in the end, right, in a 5-year plan, which is what we did, it was pretty clear, and we did really stick to that 5-year plan. There were a few components of the website that we knocked out because we realized how we were going to do a whole news section of like latest news in Montana about domestic violence, and that's just way too huge and not really what our mission was. It was sort of a side thing, so we lopped that off. I think that was the only big thing. And now we have another 5-year plan that we actually have a 10-year goals, and we're in the middle of a 5-year plan that is that those 10 years are broken in half, and we have 5-year goals, and then we broke those down into annual goals, and then for now we're in year 2 of that. For each year, then we've broken it down by month. Okay, what are we going to do? So we sit down every month with that plan and say, okay, did everybody, and we make assignments. So everyone is responsible for certain parts of that, and so that's how we stay attached to it. And we look at the next plan, and then every January we sit back down and look at the annual plan to make sure it matches with the 5-year plan, make sure it matches with the 10-year plan. So we really are staying on track with that. There are clearly variations. We push forward. If funding really does go down a lot for us, we'll have to slow down on a few areas. But we have very much stayed. I think we have stayed pretty tight to it.